Hello everyone. It's been a while since we've had an update on the track car. Thought maybe I should take a minute and shoot a quick video, show some updates and progress that I've made since heading to Watkins Glen back in August. All in preparation for Watkins Glen in 2 weeks. It takes a lot longer to get stuff done these days, so I was not able to get these things done and make it to Mossport, which was this weekend, unfortunately. But I kind of figured that might happen, so I didn't even sign up for it. So really no loss other than yet another year passes without making it up there to that awesome track. But hopefully next year will be the year for that. Anyways, you can see some changes already, some easy visual changes. I installed the high flow elbows along with the high flow MAF housings and the Dynon cold air intake to kind of all match together. Everything's a little bit bigger diameter. Obviously air filters are down in the bumper now. Should pair well with future changes that I was hoping to have done by now, but I'm still waiting for a part to be made. Hopefully here soon, but too late for this season, which is kind of okay, because once I get those remaining pieces, I'll also be swapping injectors to go along with that, which is going to require the DME to be retuned, which is also then the perfect time to just dyno tune the whole thing. Just get it running properly with all the modifications and kind of make it the, one step below the ultimate NA S62, the ultimate being ported heads with some strict cams, which who knows, maybe we'll do that in the future, but for now it's just all bolt-on stuff, and coming up soon will be a dyno tune to make it all work appropriately. So a sharp eye would also notice some other changes in the frame here. I finally was able to install the oil cooler, and you can see the oil cooler thermostat right there, but we'll get back to that in a minute. So speaking of cold air intake and oil cooler and airflow, while I had the bumper off, I took out the shroud that kind of, actually I didn't take it all the way out because it's right here, but it's kind of hard to see, but I cut it across the bottom here. Normally you can't see straight in to all this down in here because there's an electric fan that's also gone. I took that out since it's not used. It's mostly for AC. It's an auxiliary fan for higher temps, but it's really not helpful on the track unless sitting temporarily. I still have my mechanical fan for in the pits and whatnot. But eventually this is all going to get replaced with an electric fan setup as well. But for now, I wanted better airflow to the radiator, so I cut the shroud, took the fan out, and the other side benefit of that is that if we can see down in here, now we can see the oil cooler. Of course it won't focus on it, but the oil cooler is the lower gray radiator you can see, and that lower shroud normally blocks this opening that allows us to see it. That usually comes and sticks all the way to the edge of the bumper here and closes off that gap. Well, now that gap is open, which is going to allow air to be sucked in here and also go down and across the oil cooler. So hopefully that'll make it pretty effective, or at least effective enough for my purposes. So pretty happy to see that. Actually kind of interesting angle here. We can see straight through to the brakes. That's a brake duct. I got those connected as well while the bumper was off. So probably not going to expect much difference there, but it's still better than nothing. And now here, this is kind of still unfinished. You can see the filter for the cold air intake. And this is actually the rain catcher for the cold air intake kit. And this opening is what they expect you to have. They don't expect you to remove your fog lights. but I don't need them. Tiny bit of weight there. They're not used, so I'm actually still working on not a block off, but kind of a way to slow the air and block as much water as possible, because if I go on track and it's raining, um, you know, those filters are going to get soaked immediately. Not only that, but I also don't want debris impacting on my filter either. Track debris, rubber, anything, even those rubber chunks at high velocity can definitely do some damage. You can actually see a whole bunch of tire marks on here, tire rubber marks on the bumper. So I'm working on that. I might put a little update up later once I finalize kind of a junkyard fix for that. So we'll mostly still be utilizing this opening for the most airflow or air force, but this will still allow some air to come through as well, right into that pocket that's pretty much sealed off from the engine compartment to keep the hot engine air out and just the cold outside air coming in. So definitely some changes there. Took a little time, but nothing crazy. You gotta do a little, drilling and riveting for the cold air intake. But again, it's, the most time is just kind of getting everything lined up so everything will fit, because you can't just put them on willy-nilly. You got to make sure they're not too far forward, but also not too low, so the bumper will go on, and also the lower skid plate. But so we got the oil cooler installed, and that was easy because it's a CSF oil cooler that mates with the CSF radiator. So it actually has mounts on the bottom of the radiator already. So that was a 10-minute job. And then making all these dash 10 AN lines and fittings and figuring out where to mount everything took a good number of hours. I don't know for sure, but I don't know. Let's guess and say maybe 8 hours of work. There's 5 lines that I had to create. Pretty tough to see now that everything's together, but these 2 lines go down to the cooler. Kind of a geek thing, but I bought 2 different types of hose. Well, it's the same type of hose, but they're color coordinated. Theoretically, for red for hot oil going to the cooler, and blue for the hopefully nice and cool oil coming back up through the thermostat and back to the housing and then back to the engine. So here we have, this is the hot engine oil coming out of the block to the thermostat, and then when it's too cold, it mostly just bypasses here and comes back around and back to the oil filter housing. Oil pressure gauge that I had mounted in the stock location here originally, but it makes it really tight here. And in the rain, I'd like to run the valve cover or the ignition coil covers, and that made it almost impossible to put this one on. So I bought a fitting that has the 1/8 inch NPT adapter on it so that I could put it in there, and it's really fits perfect. I really like it, but for some reason I'm not getting any oil pressure there, or the gauge isn't working. So I gotta look into that a little bit, try to see what's going on with that. Not sure if it's still air. It shouldn't be. When I was running it earlier, even this line was starting to get a little warmth to it, circulating the oil back around. So it should be having oil flow there. So anyways, I got to look into this and see what's going on with that. I mean, no, the car has, or the engine has oil pressure, not only because it's nice and quiet, but I also have the idiot light sensor. The stock sensor is reconnected, and I know that works, and the idiot light's not on for oil pressure. So we'll see what that entails, but I was kind of fortunate to get this mounting location. Makes it real easy to access, obviously not laying on my back. Mostly able to minimize bends and 90s and crazy stuff that some other guys have done, or made really short hoses that are difficult to make. Obviously we have this 180 here, but it's still a pretty nice arc, so I'm super happy with the way it's turned out so far. Pretty easy to get it bolted to the fender well, so no issue there. I think it should be a good setup. I already added 2 quarts of oil. I've only ran it a couple minutes in the garage here, just to prove out that no fittings are leaking, etc., and checking the oil level along the way, because I knew not only the cooler has an oil capacity, but so do all these lines that I installed, and I lost a little bit during the process taking the stock filter lines off. We lost a little oil as well, so knew I had to make some up. I think it's just about full, but I didn't run the engine long enough for the thermostat to fully open, so we'll see how much more it takes to be like a steady, stable fill mark. But so far it's taken about 2 quarts. So I was happy to get that done and all back together. But the job wasn't done. I still needed and wanted to go through the rest of the car. I always bleed the brakes after every event from the calipers, because that fluid always looks certainly not as good as the rest of the fluid, if not already dark from a lot of heat. So it's just my SOP, my habit. I flush the calipers, all 4 corners. I usually do probably 4 to 5 pedal pumps, with my bleed bottle on there, just to push some fresh fluid into the calipers. Get that cleaned out, and then definitely inspect everything, remove tire rubber, tire snakes, get that out just for cleanliness. And then since this car is a new build, I went through all of the front and rear suspension, all the components I could reach with sockets and wrenches, and checked the torque, make sure everything was still tight on the suspension, the steering, brakes, brake caliper, mounting bolts, strut mount bolts, all that good stuff. And thankfully, did not find anything loose in the suspension or steering. But interestingly, this build they're not quite solid engine mounts, but they're a very hard durometer aftermarket engine mount, which we might be able to see this one a little bit. You can kind of see it down there. Anyways, I put my fingers on that nut right there just to see, and holy crap, the nut was loose. Turns out both the engine mount nuts had come loose just a little bit. They weren't threaded off at all, but they were finger loose. So I pulled them off and put some blue Loctite on the nuts and then retorqued them. And this is why you go through and you check everything after using it, and maybe not abusing, but track work is hard on the mechanicals on these cars, no matter what the car is. So, amateur tip, go through and recheck the torque on your bolts after you've done some work, and then used your car. Not only suspension and steering is for safety aspect, but anything could be something silly, comes loose or comes out, and it could ruin your whole weekend if you can't repair it, or if it causes damage that you can't repair. So I found that, and then actually at the track last time, the upper bolt that holds the dipstick tube had fallen out, and I discovered that during the weekend by doing my visual checkovers, and then obviously pulling the dipstick to check the oil level. That also told me that something was wrong there. So I put some Loctite on a new bolt and got that tight. And last but not least, while doing that inspection along with the work for the oil cooler lines, I had to take the alternator out so that there could be enough space to reach the block lines. And the best way I found to do that is to take the power steering pulley off and the belt, obviously. And while doing that, I was checking the power steering bolts and visually at first, and noticed that one of them was gone. So that's fun. One of the 3 bolts that secures the power steering bracket to the block. One of them was gone. The others were all still tight, so that's kind of a mystery there. You know, I guess you could chalk it up as something that I didn't torque well enough. Who knows? There's definitely more vibration with the solid or near solid mounts on the engine, so that vibration can definitely cause things to come loose. So I replaced that bolt and once again added blue Loctite to that one and removed the other ones and added blue Loctite and retorqued everything. And you'll be sure to know that I'm going to be checking everything again after the upcoming event, just to kind of give myself peace of mind that things that came loose aren't going to continue to come loose and be an actual problem. One thing I don't remember, speaking of power steering, I don't remember if I covered in a previous video, but this shiny cooler on the left here is actually a power steering cooler now, but originally this is an automatic transmission cooler for an E39. It's a direct fit, direct installation on this plastic, housing that normally holds the AC condenser, and on this side there's just a dumb, not even finned, but just a tube, for power steering cooler on the M5 as stock. So I removed that, and years and years ago I saw on the internet that somebody had found this quote unquote mod for keeping the power steering fluid cool and adding a little capacity, which also helps the fluid not heat up as quickly. So I have not really had any issues with the power steering. I added this overflow at the vent tube to keep the engine bay a little cleaner. Tracks like Watkins Glen, I don't really see anything coming in here. But like TMP in Canada, Toronto Motorsports Park, and somewhat at like Mid-Ohio, a little shorter, tighter track, you'll see fluid coming out of there from temperature and just from sloshing around really tight corners. So that's been mostly resolved. I don't really know that I would go as far as doing this mod for a street car, but if you plan to do any tracking, I would definitely do it. The coolers aren't that expensive, and it just bolts right in where the power steering lines normally go, which is right here. You don't have to modify anything there. I think a clip on the plastic shroud had to be cut off, but that was no big deal. A pair of side cutters can take care of that, and then it just snapped right in as designed, which is pretty cool. So anyways, that's the update for the front. We got some cold air and some cool oil, hopefully, on both counts, and maybe slightly cooler brakes with the brake ducts in, but not to have that be too easy of a task to get all that done. Also, finally, got the new diff from Diffs Online. It's a stock M5 diff, but with upgraded 3 clutch pack in the LSD unit, and so that'll give me better durability if nothing else. And then I also changed to a 362 ring and pinion. Stock is 315. I was running a 345, which I like a lot, but those are kind of hard to find, and I don't want to ruin that one, although time will tell if I may end up putting it back in this car for certain tracks, or who knows. But we got 362s and the 3 clutch pack setup and rem polished gears as well. I had them do that. So anyways, there's the stock 315 diff that I had in there for Watkins Glen temporarily, but now the 362s are in, and we'll be breaking that in on Friday at the track, or finishing breaking it in, and I'll change the fluid Friday night, and hopefully it'll be good to go. It'll definitely be interesting to see how my shift points change with the 362s. I'm most used to the 345s, and then like I said, back in August I had the 315s which was less than ideal. Not bad, but definitely not ideal at Watkins Glen. So anyways, your mileage will vary, and hope to see you at the track.